speaking at the Babel Bar for the first time. Can we please give a huge cheer and a massive welcome to Sam X.
Thank you, Tim. Ooh. I always get it's just a bit on my too loud. Is that better? We'll go quietly. Wow, good evening, St. Leonard's. This is a first for me in many ways. This is probably, I've been speaking on this topic, or these sort of range of topics, for about 3 years now. This is by far the most salubrious surroundings I've ever had the privilege to be in. Well done, Tim. And also, what a privilege to be in the hipster capital of the known world. Because until I sort of met Tim about a year ago, I hadn't been to St. Leonard's for about 15 years. And when I was last at St. Leonard's, you popped into a pub, as you would expect to, you want a little nibble, you go for the peanuts. Maybe the slightly urine-soaked peanuts, as they are often on the bar. When I visited Tim last year and popped, I just went to a train, popped to the little pub near the train station, usually the roughest pub in town by the train station. What did I find on the bar? Freshly baked focaccia. Next level. So I'm very excited to be here. A few people in here I recognise who've seen me before. This is also a first because I usually speak for about 3 to 4 hours on this topic, and apparently I've got 15 minutes. So I better get going and we're going to get into it. But firstly, I am endlessly curious, and I always want to ask the audience what's going on in their lives at the moment. Did anybody, to be honest, have a bad night's sleep last night?
Yes. No.
A few people unexpected. Okay, it's interesting, I had a really bad night's sleep. Apparently the bar staff did, and also I've had it on good advice from somebody. They are serving a 75% rum that completely your sleep tonight. I just had a sip before it came on, so highly recommended. So, we are going to touch on finance and crypto, but I want you to relax, because when I say those words, they can sometimes send chills down people's spine. When I say to my mum, you need to ring the bank, she stops breathing, and her shoulders go up. So I just want to say, relax, it's going to be okay. We may even look at financial charts, but keep breathing, it's going to be alright, don't worry. No pressure. Okay. So may you live in interesting times. Reportedly, an ancient Chinese quote, or potentially a curse, maybe, and it goes back to a British statement called Joseph Chamberlain, who said that he heard this from a diplomat in China in the old days. It doesn't matter whether it came from really, but for me, it's a signpost to get curious. I'd argue we do live in very interesting times, and you might see that as a blessing or a curse, but for me, non-judgment, it is what it is. Perhaps we always live in interesting times, that's the nature of being human. But let's get curious, as I am, about perhaps why these current times are maybe particularly interesting, or maybe pivotal, and perhaps more interesting than some times gone before. So what does that say? How can we navigate the times we're living in if we don't really know where we are, starting point? So I'm really curious about that, which is why I'm passionate about talking about these. Well, not those, actually, I was so bad at slides. I'm looking for a slide about cycles, and that's the best I could find. So not disappointing, but if you think I'm going to talk about bikes, we're not. I'm talking about cycles, okay? And a lot of them will be astrological, and I promise the lovely synchronicity. Tim didn't tee me up on purpose, but we're going to be talking a lot about Saturn and the Saturn return. So what's so interesting is at the moment, from my research, we are in the confluence of about 30 to 40 cycles all coming together between around 2020 and 2030, which makes this an extraordinary time to be alive. Now, they're not all astrological. Some of them are macroeconomic, socioeconomic, and we'll go into more of them. But it's interesting to get an idea of why perhaps we're seeing such tumultuous times, such interesting times, such pivotal times, and put a bit of meat on the bones of where we are and maybe why some things are playing out. So that's what we're passionate about looking at. Now, for anybody who's sceptical about astrology, J.P. Morgan there, from the banking dynasty, the Morgan banking dynasty, said it very clearly. Even if you don't believe in astrology, and I'd argue if you don't believe in astrology, it's probably because of your astrology. That J.P. Morgan said, millionaires don't use astrology, but billionaires do. And so even if you really want to stay there, and I'm not here for consensus, if you really don't believe in astrology, understand that a lot of the most powerful people in the world absolutely do, and they take action by that course. So it's just interesting to get the perspective, because that's not what the papers tell you, they like to rubbish it, but from my research, the top people like to be very in tune with it. So we'll look at a few cycles just to get kicking off, okay? We are looking at, there's a very interesting, when it comes to finance, a 28-year financial crisis cycle. And that, again, is the Saturn return. So Tim said it there, anything around 27, 28, 29 years is Saturn doing a full cycle and coming back to where it was. And within that, you've also got 7-year cycles. So 4 sevens within that. And a lot of people realise 7 is quite an important number. Often people, we hear phrases like the 7th inning stretch in baseball, or people often move house every 7 years. So these cycles, I'd argue, are embedded into the world, the fabric of the world, embedded into nature, markets, everything. Birth, rebirth, growth, boom, bust, everything is cyclical. So it's interesting to get curious about these cycles and how they might be playing out. We've also got a 50-year sort of debt jubilee cycle, which we might look at as well. And then bigger than that, a 250-year revolutionary cycle, which is based around the transit of Pluto. So that would take us back to the American Civil War and also the French Revolution. And all that's coming back now and again now. And on the biggest scale, a change of ages. So we won't argue exactly how many years, but around a 2,000-year cycle where we shift from one age to the other. Okay, we are shifting, in the process of shifting, I'd argue, from Pisces, the age of Pisces, to the age of Aquarius. So there's an awful lot going on, so you can relax. With a sleepless night last night, it's not your fault. There's a shitload of stuff going on. So, there's also a very interesting cycle that's based around empires and money, okay, currency. Anybody remember the game Risk? A classic game. So I really want to show that because there's also a reserve currency cycle, okay? And to demystify that, all a reserve currency means is the dominant currency to trade in the world at any given time, okay? And so what's interesting, I won't go back to the whole last 2 centuries, but let's go back, to millennia. I'll go back to the 12th century. We'll go back to the Venetians. The Venetians and the Florentines out of Florence, they were the dominant power at that time. So the reserve currency of the world, actually at that time, 2 currencies, the Venetian ducat and the Florentine florin. And then, following that, because these empires rise and fall, we had the Portuguese escudo come to power, the Portuguese Empire. Then we moved to the Spanish Empire with the peseta, and then we moved to the Dutch Empire with the guilder, the French Empire with the franc, the British Empire with the pound dominating trade, and we are currently in an age where the dollar, of I'd argue maybe not the American Empire, but maybe the American military industrial complex, if you like, and the dollar has become the de facto reserve currency in the world. What's interesting is despite all the differences in what's going on, the different time frames, all those reserve currencies of empires have risen and fallen in an 80 to 120 year period, all of them. So what's super interesting, you'll see in a minute, is we are in that time where we are due for a shift and the dollar falling from being reserve currency of the world. So there's an awful lot going on. And some of this may be completely new to you, some of it may put some meat on bones, something you've heard about, but get it clear, this is a lot going on, okay? So, one signal that's starting to shift, and I was aware of this, the Indians this was last summer, made the first purchase of Saudi oil using rupees. So that is the rise of the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, lots of countries joining that. But all we can say is that's a real solid sign of the end of the dollar, okay? And that shift happening, which is a huge shift. So again, a change of empire. Which takes us to gold. Because I could go back through the century and look at all these 28-year, 7-year cycles, there's loads that's really interesting, but I haven't got much time. We're going to look at just some of the real critical things that happened, okay? So, in the financial world. So let's go to 1944, which is really where the dollar was cemented as a reserve currency of the world, because it was after the Second World War, okay? Second World War, lots of reorganization of power, lots of movement of gold. We'll get too deep in the weeds of that, it's another bottomless topic. And interestingly, 1944, what's that, about 27, 28, 29 years after the First World War ended. So it's come round again, okay? Now what's really interesting, the Bretton Woods Agreement basically said, okay, the dollar's going to be the de facto reserve currency of the world, and it's backed by gold. And that's critical, okay? Because gold is known as sound money, okay? We talk about a lot of currencies as pounds and dollars, but what is sound money? Sound money, because money can be anything that you transact with to represent value. And in history that could have been shells, it could have been cocoa beans, it could have been any item. But in modern times often gold's been used because gold is very scarce. And properties of sound money is something that's got scarcity, so it holds value, and something that costs a lot to bring new currency into the market. So you have to go and mine new gold, find it, bring it to the market, therefore it's got a cost to it. A very poor money is a money that has unlimited supply, we'll come to that in a minute, and also costs very little or nothing to bring more into circulation, which is where we are today. But what's so interesting, that was cemented in 1944. Guess how many years that agreement lasted? Anybody? There we go, got it. Saturn doing its thing again, which takes us to 71, 72, where Tricky Dicky, Nixon, took the US dollar off the gold standard. And just understand, back in that day, the notes, the dollar notes, was real money. Because essentially it's promissory notes backed by real world assets. So rather than pass around the gold, you're passing around notes that you could redeem for the gold. That's very important. So that's just a more practical way of trading in real, tangible assets. But of course, in simple terms, what happened, the US had a bit of a trade deficit, they spent a lot more than they had in the vaults, and rather than when a few people like the French and Germans, when they called in the debts, which they were rightly be owed, rather than pay them, those top players threw the monopoly board up in the air and changed the rules, as they do, and they said, no, that's done now, it's not backed by gold, we're going to change it again. And this was pivotal in the world, but really important to where we are today, because not many people are really educated about this. That was such an important change, because we went from a real world-backed currency into fiat currency, pure fiat, and fiat is Latin for by decree. Just means we say it's got value. But what's interesting is, of course, because people in government decided this, it was a temporary measure. And we often know what governments do with temporary measures. They don't ever go back. Okay, and then Nixon gets embroiled, Watergate all gets forgotten. But the important point is that most people are not educated about this, and I'd argue that maybe it's by design, don't really understand us, the top bankers know what's happened. And Ray Dalio tells a really important story. He's a very well-known hedge fund manager now, hugely successful, but in 71, 72, he was a 21-year-old trader on Wall Street. So very young, youth again. He understood enough that that was bad news. That wasn't, America saying, we're all powerful, it's all good. They were basically saying we're defaulting on our debts. But of course, Nixon didn't use that language. He said, we need to protect the dollar against outside threats for your own good. They always use that kind of language. Keep us the vote, and actually just owe some money, they weren't going to bloody pay it. But Dalio was smart enough to understand, well, that's not good news. So he went to Wall Street the next morning and expected the stock market, because he was inexperienced, to crash. He thought, well, bad news, the economy, markets go down. He had the biggest lesson of his life, because the next morning, the bell went on Wall Street, and the stock market, we won't go there, sorry to it, went on a massive 30% up in a day. Huge moves in the stock market. And it made him realise something very important. The smart money, i.e. the people who understand what's going on, knew that now we're going to print money out of thin air, it's going to be devalued, now has unlimited supply. I'm not going to hold something that's been printed out of thin air and inflated away. I'm going to get the hell out of fiat currency and into assets. So asset classes went through the roof. But the man in the street didn't understand that, wasn't educated that. So from that point on, they were being robbed of their value by stealth, not really realising it, losing value through inflation. What's really interesting, so a very stark chart. If you'd known about this in 71, you could have taken good action. So the people who took good action protected their family's wealth, their generational wealth, moved out of fiat, maybe moved into gold or other commodities. And you'll see in this chart what happened if you didn't. And this goes to all currencies, but we're going to just focus on the pound. You know, in 1971, £10,000 would have bought you 635 ounces of gold. By the year 2000, it'd only buy you 63.5. By 2023, down to 6.5 ounces of gold. So essentially, all these fiat currencies are down 98, 99%. But a lot of people don't realise that, okay? And a lot of people feel like they're in this chart, okay? They're scared of financial charts. They go, at least I've got my 100 grand in there. They don't know they're in that. If they knew the chart they're in, they might think differently about where they store their wealth. Now, the smart money understand that and they take action. So it's important to understand that, in essence, it isn't that gold has gone up, because the same amount of gold in 1971 would buy you a nice, fine tailored suit and some focaccia on the bar in St. Leonard's if it existed at that time. But it was peanuts at the time, we've got a lot of peanuts. The same amount of gold would do that today. It's the collapse of the fiat currency because of the huge increase in the supply. So when we look at these assets, it's not that gold's gone up, gold has held its value, fiat has lost all its value. And you can see how big that is, but that continues today, okay? Now, one of the big things we've done in the last few years is massive money printing. It's always going on, quantitative easing, but during the COVID years, they shut the economy down and they printed unbelievable amounts of money like never before, because where did all that furlough money come from? Stop the economy, print all the money. Now, a lot of people don't realise this, and maybe it's a wake-up call to some of you, that I did the research, got a podcast, we dig into these things, get really good facts on it. If you had £100,000 in the bank in 2021, most people, and they didn't spend it, most people think they've still got 100,000. In terms of purchasing power, you're sitting on 86,000. That's 14 grand gone, and most people don't realise it. So it's important to understand the problems with fiat currency. Fiat currency is not sound money. All fiat currencies have to die and fall and come to an end because it's infinite and we printed out existence, and they all have fallen in the end. So that's where we are. So it's important to understand that. Oh my gosh, I've got 13 minutes gone already. Where are we going? So one of the big shifts I want to talk about, I did have a Christmas photo, and that was just me last night before I had this lovely day. I think I just want to see some sun and sea and sand and sky. It's been a bloody hard winter. But what did I talk about? The biggest shift was the age shift, okay? So we've gone from the age of Pisces, which is a water sign, okay? The last 2,000 years. Everything in the water, maritime law, all that financial language, currencies, riverbanks, citizenships, partnerships, all that water language from that, and the maritime law, you're in the dock. All that water language has dominated the last 2,000 years. We are moving to Aquarius, which is an air sign. So we are moving into the cloud. Okay? So there's a massive shift happening. So that is part of the digital shift that's going on. I'm going to talk these shifts, neutrally, they're just happening. They have the full spectrum in them. Pisces is not a good or bad age. Aquarius is not a good or bad age. Just ages of different qualities. One of the qualities of Aquarius, a lot of very new agey people think it's just all fluffy unicorns and pink lollipops. It's all stuff in there, and two of the big things in Aquarius are high tech and in the air. Okay, and that's one of the really interesting shifts that's happening at the moment. Which takes me to this slide, which is, funny enough, the rise of Bitcoin. Okay, so this gentleman here, back in 2010, so Bitcoin came on the scene in 08-09 as a response to the financial crash at that time, the subprime mortgage fiasco, and Bitcoin was a response to that. I won't go deep into Bitcoin today, but interestingly, this guy here in 2010 was on an internet message board, and a guy called Laszlo Hanyek was offering 10,000 Bitcoin if somebody would get him 2 pizzas. Now, Jeremy Sullivan was up for that, because it was going to be the first real-world transaction of Bitcoin. So I thought, yeah, I'm up for that, that'd be interesting, fun. So he accepted it, and he delivered the pizzas, got the pizzas. They were very pleased themselves. They made this new currency, this new money work. It's happening, it's real. That was back in 2000, so that was 10,000 Bitcoin was about $20. Now, Jeremy didn't. He was a 19-year-old student, so I'm sure he probably spent it on tequila and chasing ladies, or buying some more computer gear. Judge for yourself what he did with the money. He didn't keep it. If he kept it and was sat here today, he'd be sitting on $650 million. Such is the growth of Bitcoin. Okay? So really, Bitcoin was the start of this digital revolution. Okay? Blockchain technology. We're not going to get deep in the weeds of all that works. But understand this is part of the shift, part of the digital shift. So arguably what we have now is a new gold on the scene, okay, Bitcoin. So it has its own qualities. A lot of people think there's nothing to it, but when I hear that, I want to say, I'm fine with all your opinions, but think of what there is to your fiat currency, okay? And always do the comparison. So before one throws that one out, have a look at what you're comparing it to, and then make a decision from there and get educated, because it might change your opinion. And essentially, Bitcoin has become an additional gold, and it has qualities gold doesn't have. Gold's very hard to divide, very hard to transport. Yet with Bitcoin, you could cross borders, you could send $5, $1 million, and because it's decentralized, not going through intermediaries like the legacy financial system, you can send £1 million worth of Bitcoin to somebody, no questions asked, which is why the big boys have it as well. You're not going via a state right? There's no one saying, yes, you can do that, it's happening anyway. So there's a new player in town, really, and a lot of people are confused by what it is, but this is part of this huge shift. And I'm going to show one financial chart, but I want to just demystify. So this is the all-time chart of Bitcoin. It's not updated today, because actually today we are back at 65,000 up here, so we're about a little bit higher than there. But just to demystify that everything's based on what's happening in the macro, okay? This is where the pizzas were bought down here, back in 2010, and Bitcoin's gone from 0.04 cents to $65,000 around the area with these bull markets, bear markets. The important thing I'm going to educate tonight about is this orange line. This is the DXY, okay? The dollar strength index. And in simple terms, what it's showing is the strength of the dollar being inverse to the rise of Bitcoin. And you can look at this in lots of asset charts, but I want to explain to you why Bitcoin moves. Because a lot of people just buy Bitcoin and poke it, and they love it when it's going up and they're terrible when it's going down. Do you understand what's happening? It changes the whole game. Essentially, money printing. Increasing the money supply, smart money getting out of fiat into assets, and crypto blockchain is an asset, Bitcoin's an asset. Asset classes go up. Quantitative tightening, interest rates go up, money shrinks out of the system, people sell and move back to dollar. And you can see we've got a peak in Bitcoin, we've got a low in the dollar. Lows in the dollar, and there we go. The last, look at that, that's COVID. That money printing took Bitcoin from $3,000 in March 2020 to $69,000 in November 2021. Whilst if you sat in fiat currency, you're probably down 20% or so. But what's interesting is, people think, oh God, because they've heard about the crash. The crash up there, just another bear market. They think, I'm so glad I buy Bitcoin. They've lost all their money. The reality is, if somebody bought Bitcoin there, and even after the crash and the mainstream media and the Economist front cover said the end of Bitcoin and the crypto, they were still 5 times up their investment. And if they'd done nothing in fiat currency, they're probably down 20%. But they don't understand that. They're not educated about that. And today, if you've done that and held on, then you're up to from $3,000 to $65,000. So we'll go to the weeds. So I've got to really crack on and almost wrap up. What this shift is also another SAT return, okay? Because crypto and blockchain technology, Bitcoin just being the original one, there are now thousands of assets out there. People just think it's a fad, it's another currency. In essence, what we're looking at is the SAT return of the internet. So a lot of us would start using internet email back in 92, 93, 94, around there. I remember I lived in France and going to the Cyber Cafe, and the internet cafes, going to the computer at the back behind the pool table, telling my mum to get a Hotmail account, and we got one, sent an email, and I thought I'd go back to that same cafe to get it, for it to go to that computer. A lot's happened since then. That was Web 1.0, where literally if we go on the internet, it was quite decentralised at the time, quite exciting, people thought it was going to revolutionise things. But that was where we were there. This whole cycle to Web3, which is what crypto and blockchain is guess what? Web3 really version around 2022, 28 years. Okay? So it's the internet SAP return. So halfway through the SAP return, about 14 years on, 2008, we've got the rise of Web 2.0, which is the rise of social media, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, where you're not reading the internet, you are participatory, you are uploading your data, you're interacting with it, but it's still totally centralized because say I upload this video to YouTube and YouTube decide they don't like it, they own it. All the data on Facebook is not yours, they own it. It's centralized, okay? And what we had there was the beginning of apps. Okay, apps transformed. The iPhone in 2008, that's transformed the way we've transacted over time to today. And we are now 14 years on from that, around 2022 onwards. Web 3.0 is the next iteration of the internet. Decentralized, no intermediaries, it's a huge burgeoning space. Okay, so I just want to sum up quickly that whatever you've been told, I can tell you now, everything I'll be sure about, crypto is not a fad, it is not a scam, it is the baseline technology of the future for good, bad, and ugly purposes. It's not good or bad, it just is and can be used in all the full spectrum of ways. A lot of the big players want to tell you it's just a fad, don't worry about it, don't get into it as a scam. I'll give you an example. Santander, currently in the UK, will protect you from buying Bitcoin or Ethereum because it's a scam. They'll only let you put a little bit of your fiat currency in there, you must stay safe with us. Whilst at the same time, they are helping their Swiss private clients buy the same assets and they own it themselves. So do as we say, not as we do. That's how they play the game. Because they understand the wealth transfer, they understand this is a new, we are moving from an internet of information to an internet of value. Okay? And we are at the beginning. So this is an absolute huge shift. It's a bottomless rabbit hole. I've gone over time already, I've hardly started, but if you found that at all interesting, trying to demystify what's going on, I have the Uncharted Territory podcast. There I am, with my co-host Dan, and we look at all this in a holistic manner. And again, everyone's getting for me, I've got cards, because what I'm passionate about is demystifying, educating, not because I promote crypto at all, or that, but I just want people to understand what's going on. So much bad info, disinfo, misinfo, strong opinions, and a lot of it's not based on what's really going on. And I think you have a different perspective on what's going on when you understand some of the holistic view which I try and give. Because this is a shift that's happening. You don't have to like it, I'm not a techie guy, but I like to discuss it and educate, because when we're in changing times, that's helpful to know that you understand that ahead of time and be ahead of the curve, and then you can position yourself accordingly and you can benefit from the technologies and maybe not be as controlled by some of the technologies in a nefarious sense. So education is the bottom line. On your sovereign path as a unique human being, you decide where to go for it, with it, or how you might involve in it or not. So thank you for your time. I hope it's been interesting, and I'm delighted to take any questions.